I need an arm and leg. I need an arm and head. CARTI and Davinci.
Welcome to Davinci Resolve Basics Part 3. In today's episode, we're going to be covering shakes and movement, and this is probably one of the harder things to explain because shakes and movement are very situational to the clip, the song, the edit style, and basically everything. We want you to understand why movement works the way it does and why shakes work the way they do, so that's going to be your goal for this episode. Instead of showing you like, hey, do this shake, or hey, do this zoom, you want to actually understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, because that's how you become a good editor. But yeah, enough yapping. So going into this first clip that I have, which is remapped like that, I have everything laid out. This is just my clip and a resize because like it wasn't the same aspect ratio. But yeah, I have my thing set up like this. You have it on the bottom probably, but I'm doing the same layout that you would normally do on a horizontal workflow. So the first thing we're going to be taking a look at is your F shake. So we're going to be covering the F shake node. We're going to be covering the camera shake node that comes with Davinci Resolve. We're going to be covering the transform node that we already covered, but I'm going to be going a little bit more in depth with what the transform node actually can do. And last but not least, we are going to be covering the DVE node. So starting off with the most basic node, we have the camera shake. So this is going to be the shake that comes with Davinci. If you don't want to install any plugins and you just want to use the base nodes that Davinci Resolve gives you, you're probably going to be using the camera shake node. We have a lot of settings here. I know this might look a little bit complicated if you've never used this node. It's really simple. This X deviation basically controls how strong it is. In other words, your amplitude for like other shakes like S shake and F shake. That's what that does. And the Y is the exact same thing, but for the Y axis, rotation is the same thing as the other ones, just that it controls the rotation of it. Randomness basically just controls randomness. I don't really know how to explain this. The overall strength, as the name suggests, controls your overall strength of your rotation, your Y, and your X. So if I wanted to, let's say, make a shake here, I would just keyframe my overall strength, go where I want it to end, put it all the way down, or you could leave it. I leave it sometimes like a very low amount. You just play with your graph. I like doing graphs like these, or like these, or very sharp ones like this. The graph really just depends on your clip and what type of vibe you're going for with your edit. The speed literally just controls how fast the shake moves. This is also known as the frequency in other shakes. So yeah, you have your edges, which you might remember from your transform node. In last episode, when we did the offset framers in our transitions, the edges is the same thing here. So I put it on mirror, and yeah, you could literally just do a shake like that if you wanted. Play around with the settings, get something that you like. Next, we have F shake. This is a shake made by my friend Fruki. So this is a fuse. Usually people give out their fuses with a price, but Fruki being Fruki, give it out for free because he's the GOAT. So yeah, you can download this for free by going to the server in my description and going to the Davinci Resolve resources channel, and all of Fruki's custom fuses and macros will be there for you to grab. Anyways, so your amplitude is basically your strength and how far your shake is actually moving. So as you can see, I have a bunch of mirrored edges here because my amplitude is really high. Personally, for my edits, like doing an amplitude of around 2 all the way to 7. It really just depends on what shake I'm doing. Your frequency controls your speed. You can make that low if you want. You can make it high. It doesn't really matter. It's up to you. Your time base is basically just, your time base has 2 options: override FPS and comp FPS. Basically what it does is you could put the shake on a different frame rate. So let's say I was on 60 FPS, but I wanted my frame rate to be on like 30. You can make 30. If I wanted it to be on 9, it could be on 9. It makes it a lot more jittery the lower it is. So if I wanted a shake that's in, like, for example, 2 FPS, it's going to be super jittery. And if I wanted a shake that is in 40, it'll be way smoother and way slower. So yeah. Next we have phase. So let's say I want to go to frame 0 and I don't want this to start over here, and I want the Y to start a bit higher. I could use my phase slider to basically change where my shake is positioned on the frame I want it to be positioned. If I wanted my phase to start there, I can make it start there. You can go and make it start like here. Pretty nice. And then your Z dist is basically just how far your Z is. So your Z would be like your scale. Your pivot is where you're pivoting. So let's say if I wanted to zoom out and then pivot to the bottom left, I could do that. So yeah, that's what that does. And then your seed is pretty self-explanatory. It's basically just reseeding your shake. So, if you've ever played Minecraft, every time you have a new world seed, it's like different. So it's just changing the seed of the shake. And your stillness is, let's say you are on a twitchy shake. Your stillness basically controls how still the shake is. Right there, I have it at 0, so it's not still at all. If I have it towards the top, it'll be really still and it won't move. The twitch frequency is how frequent the twitch is. But yeah, I don't really use twitchy shakes. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a big fan at all. It's just I just use the normal one, and you're probably gonna want to use the normal one for most things. The motion blur is just a motion blur, so yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. Then we have your individual sliders for the X, the Y, and the Z, and the tilt. The X amplitude controls how strong the X is, same as the Y, same as the Z, and same as the tilt. Moving on to the transform, this basically transforms your clip, you know, so you can zoom it in, zoom it out, change the angle, change the aspect. You can unlock this and then change the individual X and Y for your size. You have your center, and then you have your pivot point, which will basically just be like an anchor point, and you could zoom into that point. If you change the angle, it'll use this as an anchor on where to move it. Then you have your edges. I usually like having my thing zoomed in slightly to, you know, get rid of the tiles. And then I also like having a thing called passive movement, which I'm just going to show you real quick. And basically all passive movement is movement that's happening throughout the entire clip, like that little zoom in, giving the clip more movement. Passive movement is really important. And CARTI will go more in depth with that. Now that you know what a transform does and all those other nodes, you have your DVE. DVE is more of an interesting one. I like doing this for framers and just to do a like change in positioning in like the middle of my clip. So basically what this is kind of like a fake 3D space. So you can like control your clip the way you would control a image plane with a transform 3D. So if I wanted it to look like this and like this, I could move my pivot and that would change that. I could move my center, my Z. So you could get really creative with this and do some cool stuff, you know, make it really look 3D. But yeah, that's kind of just a bonus note I wanted to show you.
When we're talking about shakes in motion, there's a few things that you have to look at. So the first thing you want to look at is your character's motion, right? So we have Tangen here, and he starts by moving upwards, right? And then what he does is he's extending his arms out because he's about to launch an attack, and he's moving downwards in this direction. We want this to lead into the camera movement of the next clip. So we're going to start that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add my transform node. The first thing that I want to do is I'm going to add a size keyframe and zoom in on him as his arms like curl up. So 1.2, I'm going to set the pivot maybe a little higher like this, and then we will open the graph. And what I'm going to do for this one specifically is I'm going to make a really sharp mid graph. It just goes over the entire clip. We're going to put it like right here. Honestly, what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to start the blend. So we're just going to keyframe that one and start it here and then like this. So we have a little bit of fade in. We have the first initial zoom, right? That's zooming throughout the entire clip. And what this gives us is leeway. So now that we're like zoomed in somewhat, when we do our shake, it's not going to be showing motion tile because we're zoomed in. So that's like the first benefit. Before we do our shakes though, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another transform, and I'm going to set up the camera movement for the outro. We're going to keyframe the size because we're going to zoom back out. So we're going to keyframe it at 9 and go to 19, and I'm going to zoom it out probably to 0.8 and then set the edges to mirror. And what I'm going to do is move the pivot point. So it's going to be going this way, and I'm actually going to do like maybe like 0.9. Okay, so we have all these mirrored edges showing, right? So we're going to just do a pretty sharp graph on this outro. And actually I'm going to move it back one keyframe because we're going to do an offset framer. So you can see all this motion is starting to pull that direction. We're going to create motion blur, size of the quality, center bias. I'm going to do it this way because it's hiding more motion tile, shutter angle, and then I'm just going to add a offset. So Ikawa tool, easy offset. And you can do this with a transform either way. So I'm just going to use Ikawa's tool. This is what I usually use. So I think the outro is a little bit too fast. I like to go back and forth between tight graphs and mid graphs. All right, that's looking fine to me. Okay, so now we're going to go on to the next clip. So basically we're going to do what we just did in reverse. So and this one will be a little bit sharper because it's a longer clip. So together with both of those clips, let's see how it looks. The camera movement is following, but I think the offset framers are hurting it more because it's going horizontally. What I'm going to do is literally just use directional blur instead. So, and then we're just going to keyframe the length, go back at 0. That looks a lot cleaner. So we're literally just going to do that exact same thing. And that should be a lot better than what we had. Okay, so as you can see, we have issues here. Number one, we have motion tile on both clips during the transitions. So there's a few fixes to that. Before we do any of that, we're going to put in our shakes. So the first thing you want to do is you want to always put your shakes before your transforms. So I'm going to, after the merge, type in F shake, and I'm just going to put it up here before the transform. So first thing I'm going to do is make sure I set my override FPS to 18 because I'm editing in 18, and reload to make sure it loads. Amplitude at 0. And then I'm going to just keyframe at 5. I don't want anything super intense. I want kind of a looser shake. I'm going to do a loose graph here, something like this. And then I'm not a big fan of how much this rocks upwards. So what I'm going to do is, one, I'm going to add Z shake and then tilt shake as well. And then we're going to just change the seed. So go to the highest part of your shake, which for mine is right here at frame 3. Mess around with the seed until I get a shake that I like for this clip. The clip already had a shake on it, so I don't want to overpower it too much. So we have that, and real quick, just because this is what I do with every single time I edit, I'm going to add a lens blur. So the one I use is a BCC lens blur OBS. Go to like halfway point of the clip, set it down, go to the end, set it back up. Usually do a graph like this, and then maybe something a little tighter for the outro. Okay, so we have our movement, we have our shake right here as he pops his arm up. What we also need is another shake right here as he's going down that way. So amplitude at 0, and then we're just going to smooth out the graph. I'm gonna add a little bit more tilt to it. We're gonna add some Z. Yeah, I really like that. As soon as we put this shake on, what I did was basically make the shake lean the camera towards this direction. So we're already getting motion tile, which is it's a good thing to like indicate how you're moving. So then when we put it in with our transforms, the shakes and the movement look a lot more fluid. Actually, something that you can do too, instead of using directional blur for just one frame, and I say this very lightly, I don't think you should be putting it over every frame. You can just keyframe this at 0 here instead. So like a few frames back, you have to make the graph like match with it, otherwise it'll look clunky. Like this makes sense in my eyes. So that clip's done. Like, look at that. Just by that, that's super smooth. Obviously we have motion tiles, so we're gonna go back and hide that afterwards at the very end. Right here where he says in, we can get more dynamic with how we paste this. So I'm going to actually add another transform node, and we're going to zoom it in right here. So I'm going to keyframe it at 0. We know I wanted it at 6 because I have my marker there. I'm just going to go over here and set it to like maybe 1.3. Actually, I think 1.3 is a little too much. We'll do like 1.2. But this makes more sense. So we have that keyframed, and I'm just going to do the same type of graph here. Let's do it pretty sharp mid graph. Also, those values might be a little too much if I'm being honest. So I don't know. This looks terrible to me, and this is just what happens when you're editing, right? You're gonna have things that you just do not like. So I'm going to change this a lot. Actually, I'm gonna just change the graph completely. It's literally just trial and error. Like, you just have to go through and figure out what you like, what you don't like, and until you get it right. And I honestly think the biggest issue here is my pivot point is too much to the left. To be honest, I just don't think it fits with the pacing at all. But this is what I do every time I edit, you know, experiment things. We're gonna get started with the shake on this. Okay, so we're going to add an F shake. V3. I'm gonna go right here, and we're gonna set the amplitude to 5, or just keyframe it where you want it, obviously. And then we'll just do it over the whole clip. So set it to 0. So you want it to start right because all the camera movement is happening right here in the beginning. So you want all the shake to be right there. And I'm gonna do a graph maybe like this. And then I think we need a lot more amplitude there. So I'm gonna set it to like 10. Then turn the frequency to, let me see, 11. I think 11 fits more. One, I think this graph is like way too long, so we're going to tighten it up. And then also I think the frequency is too high, so I'm going to set it lower to like 8. Yeah, that looks a lot better to me. A lot of people think, like, obviously these shakes aren't super strong. They're not high amplitude. They're gonna look even less strong, you know, when you're watching on your phone, which is why I like to like shrink down my viewers sometimes as I'm editing. You see how it would look like on a smaller screen. When it's amplified like this, you're gonna see all the movement, and you're gonna be like, oh, okay, that shake's bigger. But when someone's watching on their phone, they're not gonna notice it as much. You'll probably assume that the shakes are smaller. They don't have a lot of impact, and you're better off not doing them, but they actually do add a ton more. I think it's like absolutely necessary that you add shakes. So we have our shakes down, right? Okay, so we're gonna go back to our motion tile. And actually before that, let me do this. I forgot to add my lens blur. So lens blur, BCC lens blur OBS, that's my favorite. You can do just regular lens blur if you want, it doesn't matter. I just really like this one. the shakes there good. So we're going to go ahead and hide our motion tile now. So what I do is look for each frame where there is motion tile. So we hit it pretty well with these shakes. There's actually some right here on the bottom. So this is motion tile right here. It's reflecting. What I'm going to do is just add another transform after everything. Zoom it in until you can't see the motion tile. And then obviously like right here, you're going to see it. So I would honestly zoom it in even more. And then the only parts where you can see motion tile really are these last two, which this is fine because we're going to be setting framers here anyways. So we have that. Let's just check this clip for the exact same. So motion tile all right here on the left. So we have it. I think that's literally it from the shake. Yeah. So it's like right there. So it's gonna zoom it in. We're not even gonna keyframe the zoom. We're just basically just zooming in our viewer just a little bit until you can't see anything. So now we have just the remapped clips versus the remapped clips with the shake. So this is the original. Disable that. You have a lot more fluidity there. And so this is where your style can really come into play with different shakes. So if I had a more aggressive audio here, for example, I would be running a lot more aggressive shakes. What I would probably do is add like F shake, and I would set the amplitude literally to like 1, frequency to like 19 maybe. And even lower than that, I would go like maybe 7. Yeah, so if I was doing an impact edit, I would have like a constant shake like this over like everything. It just adds a lot more, I guess, tension to your movement. It's like very bouncy. I know some people don't really like it. I personally like it for impact. So just have a little constant shake over everything. I'm gonna actually move the Z amp down. All right, obviously if you're like an actual camera in the Demon Slayer universe, you're like a cameraman recording this, I think it'd be shaking a little from, you know, taking shockwaves, things like blades and stuff, the strength. There would be like movement in the room, you know what I'm saying? You don't want a stiff camera. You don't want something that's just sitting there like completely still. Basically, you're trying to replicate actual movement with your camera as if you were there recording a scene and making it flow together. So bam, that's how I would do my shakes.
I just want to say a big thank you to CARTI again for helping me with this series. So if you're not following him or subscribed to him, make sure you go do that. Also, I want to give a big shout out to Fruki. Make sure you join Fusion so you can get these free macros and fuses that Fruki made. Also, the server is a unit, so if you want to apply and try to get in, you can do that as well. And yeah, I'll see you guys in part 4.